From myth-busting to butt-and-ing, persuading people to do accessibility work, presented by Steve Barnett, Ali Bites, 2021.
I'm going to talk about from myth-busting to butt-anding, persuading people to do accessibility work. Your homework from this talk, should you choose to accept it, is when you're talking to people about persuading them to do accessibility work, agree with their objections to doing it, and then see where you go from there. Agenda. Some typical objections, the things that I'm going to talk about in these 10 minutes. Number one, accessibility is boring. Number two, accessibility is difficult. Number three, accessibility is time consuming. Who am I? That's a good question. I'm not sure yet, but my name is Steve Barnett. I'm a front-end developer and UX person. I've been doing it since about 2005, which means I'm approximately infinity years old in internet years. And I do accessibility and front-end work at a place called Totara Learning, which is a CMS-y e-learning kind of thing with lots of pretty bits around the sides. I'd like to introduce a clumsy conjunction called but/and, but/and. I was introduced to it by Robin Sloan, who's an author and amazing internet weirdo. You should definitely check him out. He uses but/and to join phrases that need a turn or a twist. You know, sometimes you join two sentences with a but it kind of feels like the first sentence is you should ignore it. Or when you join them with an and, it feels like they're the same thing. Often, you want to join them and have a bit of a twist in the middle. For example, giving a talk is kind of scary, and it's a lot of fun. Why and? Why did I move from other things? Well, what did I move from? I used to do a bunch of things when trying to persuade people to do accessibility work. One of them was taking the moral high ground. This is the right thing to do. That worked out okay sometimes. The other thing that I enjoyed doing was myth busting. A popular one for me was we don't have any users with disabilities. So I would talk about, for instance, explaining how that might be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe you don't have any users with disabilities because they can't use your stuff because it's broken for them. Or maybe you do have users with disabilities, but they're not showing up in your stats or research. Then one day I was having a bit of a think, as you do, and I thought, hang on, why am I not using inclusiveness, empathy, bringing in a bit of perspective to these people I'm talking to, my colleagues, in the same way that I'm asking them to do and doing myself for our users. And then I also thought maybe this taking the moral high ground and this myth busting is a little bit kind of antagonistic and actually makes it sound like it's a fight between me and them, when actually we're in it together. And nobody likes being told off. People don't change their behavior from being shamed into something or from being punished for something. Maybe in the very short term it does, but not in the long term, which is what we're really after, right? So let's look at the first one. Accessibility is boring. Doing it for compliance reasons is pretty boring and pretty dry. And it's often not really super shiny or glamorous work. And it is worth doing, even though it's boring. And hopefully you'll see why. Other boring things we do, for example, are maintenance work. That's not shiny or glamorous. Security updates, not the thing that everyone wants to be spending their time on, but we do it. Or writing tests. A lot of people see this as boring. I secretly find it kind of fun. But this is a thing, these are things that are boring, but we do them anyway because we realize how important they are. And I think that's true for accessibility as well. Number two, accessibility is difficult. This is tricky. I mean, actually, it's easy to get ARIA wrong when you're writing it. And then in the end, maybe you end up with something a bit worse than if you hadn't written any ARIA in the first place. And I think it's also true, based on experience and based on the recent WebAIM Million survey, some frameworks make it a bit easier to do the wrong thing, which is actually not ideal. So accessibility is difficult, and it is worth doing, even though it's difficult. Other difficult things we do include learning something new almost every day. Working in tech means we're in one of the fastest paced industries. There's something new popping up all the time. CSS Grid is a thing that is still actually really new when you think about it. It wasn't around a year or two ago. All of a sudden, it's everywhere. We can use it in every site that we built, just about. And you start rolling this back a bit more, like, oh, what about the picture element and friends like SourceSet? You roll it back a bit more. What about responsive web design? There was a whole era when that wasn't even a thing. Oof. So we're learning stuff all the time, and that's pretty difficult. Number 3, accessibility is time consuming. Oof, you know what? Designing, developing, testing code is time consuming. The same is true for accessibility code as it is for all kinds of code, right? And if you follow number 1 or number 2 and you feel like it's boring or you feel like it's difficult or both, then it's going to be even more time consuming because you have to put more oomph into it just to get it done. And it's worth doing even though it's time consuming. There are many time consuming things we do in our day-to-day work. One of them is cross-browser testing or device testing or tech testing, like assistive tech testing. We don't decide like, you know what, it's a bit too much. I'm going to spend a bit too long just checking this in IE or in that Safari on Mac. I'm just not going to do it because it's going to take too long. Well, okay, maybe sometimes we do, but we normally don't. We say, you know what, it's important enough to us that even though it's time consuming, we're going to spend some time doing it. And I think that that's a good argument for doing accessibility as well. So accessibility is boring, it's difficult, it's time consuming, and it's worth doing, just like a lot of other boring or difficult or time consuming things that we do. Your homework, should you choose to accept it, is when you're persuading people to do some accessibility work, maybe take a different tack than you might normally do, like I certainly used to. Start with agreeing with their objections, and then see where you go from there.
Ali Bytes, 2021.